Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to the Sikh Network show. Today is a special program, and sitting at home, you're probably wondering why. Well, I'm going to introduce my guests. To my far left is, I'll say, Councillor Preet Kaur Gill, who's a board member of the Sikh Network, but is now the prospective parliamentary candidate for Birmingham Edgbaston, and that's why it's a special programme. And immediately to my left is Jazz Singh, who's also a board member of the Sikh Network. So perhaps we should say Fateh first.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Preet, we've got to start with you. How does it feel? Has it sunk in?
No, I don't think it's sunk in because I only found out on Thursday night.
Yeah.
And I had some personal, my nanny passed away, and so there was a funeral on Friday morning, and and it's been sort of on the go really, and I've launched my campaign this morning. I had a really excellent turnout, lots of door knocking today, so it's I feel really honoured to have got this seat, and now it's all about actually making sure, working hard, campaigning, and just actually going with it, because the time frame is very short, as you know. So there hasn't been a lot of time to really kind of digest actually what's happened in the sort of last 48 hours.
Because we were just talking, you say you're one of us, and it feels really odd. You're trying to move house, you've got young children, and now the reality's really kicked in.
Yeah.
I'm going to sort of go back to where we started on this. The Sikh Manifesto, and the very first item, which we're going to focus on for the next 20-25 minutes, was about better representation in Parliament. And just for the viewers, if you go back, there was one time when we had 5 Sikh MPs. And that was a record. But when we produced the Sikh Manifesto in 2015, we said in there, quite controversially, there are likely to be no Sikh MPs, and that proved to be the case. Jazz, in terms of what people have been saying for the last 2 years, they've focused quite a lot on this. You produced a manifesto, but we got no Sikh MPs. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, before I get into that, I just want to obviously, again, give my congratulations to Preet for her nomination. It's been a huge amount of work, and only those behind the scenes know that the effort and time and the commitment that goes into not only just getting that selection, but actually prepping for this. And as you mentioned, when we put the manifesto out in 2015, this is something that we were quite conscious of. And even remember having the conversation with Preet at the time, but that probably was a little too soon to actually start to campaign around it. But over the last 2 years, a huge amount of effort's gone on from Preet, commitment from all of her family to support her in this. And we all know actually the additional stuff and pressures women have to manage all of that and manage a full-time job, and to be of the calibre of the candidate that she is as well. I think it's just commendable. So congratulations to Preet on that, and something that we'll be doing a lot more of going forward. But come back to your question around the history. So, and again, this is something that we've realised that historically, even with the lobby pressure, politics and the lack of or number of Sikhs in politics wasn't really a big issue. Certainly not in households and not in Gurdwara. There were the odd Sikh MP that we could get to and get a room booked and hold a lobby. And we'll come on to those, whether it's Bamjit Singh Gill, Bamjit Singh Danda from Labour was also a minister. But what really happens when we started to come together, when we formed the network and actually wanted to take into a new direction and be more activism politics as opposed to the traditional come to a Gurdwara, take the photograph politics, what we realised and the analysis that we did, we took at it from a really analytical point of view and said, right, let's get into the seats that are out there, the constituencies, the voter ranges, what really is the outlook. And we probably went into more detail than UK polling does on this specifically. And when we built the manifesto, we wanted to be credible. And that was the claim that we made. We predicted that we would have no Sikh MPs, and that was effectively ground zero. And I think that was a shock to many. And I think also the way we launched the manifesto in the Gurdwara is out there in the mainstream, on mainstream radio channels. All the political parties picked up. We held our own hustings. What it did do is it suddenly put the spotlight on that one issue. That suddenly here is an ethnic minority community that's hugely recognised and welcomed, but there's not going to have any MPs. And I think nobody was prepared for that. other than us, and I think that's the thing that really put this topic on the map.
Let me just go back to the 18th of April. Theresa May standing outside 10 Downing Street and announces we're going to have a general election on the 8th of June, obviously subject to parliamentary approval, which came the next day. I think everyone was shocked to say, we were planning for 2020. And I think lots of individual aspiring politicians were probably planning for 2020. But in a sense, that was an opportunity. And obviously what we've just seen literally since the 18th or the 19th of April is not only have we got Preet, we've also got Dhanmanjit Singh Desi. What I was going to say to you, Preet, was how's it felt in terms of, we all know each other, we know Dhanmanjit phones us, we talk to him. But, I remember what we said is this is an opportunity to have our first Sikh woman and the first visible turban-wearing Sikh. And actually, we've got both in winnable seats. How does that feel? Does it feel we're halfway there in terms of the manifesto, in terms of that particular pledge?
Yeah, it feels really incredible because, like you said, we'd been planning for 2020. And then suddenly to get the announcement of the general election and have two Sikhs in, one in a very safe seat and one in a very winnable seat, and the reality that actually representation, there's starting to be a shift. But I think for me, there's been a real commitment by the Labour Party, and I think that's really positive as a sort of Labour member, that they are prepared to look at, those that are already serving in local government. So I think for me that's been great, is people that on the ground are doing are working as councillors, have already got that sort of wealth of experience, are actually given an opportunity. And I think it's interesting, today's campaign, a lot of people, one of the things they're interested in is where are you from? And being born, raised, lived in the constituency really made a difference to people, because they feel that you actually genuinely care about the place you want to serve. You've got the connections, and you're not just been, brought in from London or somewhere else. And so incredible.
But let me just go back to Preet, because I don't want to leave this issue for the viewers. You're born in Edgbaston, you went to school there, you work there, but your accent, because you've been around the world, your accent isn't a Brummie accent. So don't you get that on the doorsteps of people saying, do you really come from Edgbaston?
Well, yeah, and it's interesting because the constituency is made up of 4 wards, and actually I think a lot of people in Edgbaston, Harborne actually speak very similar to me, myself. So I think there is some connectivity in some parts of it, and obviously there are some parts where absolutely they would say, well, where are you actually from? And the fact that I live on the border in any event, and with the boundary view, I'll actually be living in the constituency is pretty great. So,
Chaz, you were going to...
No, I was going to say that actually... mentioned Dhanmanjit, and is another one who's supported the launch of the manifesto and supported the network. And we, again, vice versa, his support. And again, a big congratulations to Dhanmanjit for his selection in Slough. And there's a big Sikh constituency in terms of population in Slough. So again, you mentioned the first turban-wearing Sikh. And going back in 2015, and we had others as well that are part of the network, like Chaz Singh and Randeep, who also were in the mix for this year. I think what it does do, it demonstrates that how hard the process is, for one, that this isn't a given. Even though we had no Sikh MPs, it wasn't a given that we would get one. And I do commend the Labour Party and Tom Watson for because they were on record, they were publicly made commitments to the community on national television that they would do everything to address the balance. And they've honoured that commitment as the party. And I know they changed the process in terms of the timing to reflect that and how they would select candidates, but nevertheless, our responsibility was to have candidates there. And one of the objectives the network had from 2015, because we also had conversations around by-elections, because you can never know when a by-election will come. So you have to be ready. And this is something, again, some of the viewers probably may not know, is that we've worked non-stop on this issue for 2 years, in fact. Although people may sort of get excitable when elections announced and then they start to think about it, it's too late. The groundwork has to be done 5 years ahead of that. And as a team, as a collective, both for Labour and the Conservative Party, that we have a balance for both, that we were putting in the work and building relationships to actually raise profile of Sikh candidates, both in the Conservatives and Labour, and put them in the right positions, get them on certain schemes. And I know, Pete, you're on the Joe Cox leadership scheme and things like that, because these are the things that get you in front of selectors. And it's similar in our professional lives. We all strive for promotion, but you have to do the right things. Yeah. You have to be known for certain issues and getting your point of view out there. So that's some of the work that we did with all of our candidates, all of our members within the Sikh Network, and lobbied hard with politicians behind the scenes to ensure that we took their advice to what do the candidates need to do, and build those mentorships, but ultimately have the candidates ready and then use that for when the time came.
Let me just sort of go back to, and I want to talk a bit about Tom, because Tom gave an absolute commitment on having Sikh representation in Parliament, and others like John McDonnell, Jeremy Corbyn, they've all been on record. They've been in Gurdwaras and they've said, we will make this happen. And I think all credit to them. But only half the job's done. Preet, you know, you're selected as the candidate, 2,700 majority in Edgbaston. I think this is particularly important to the viewers, is actually this is the first hurdle, getting your name on that ballot paper. But actually, what are the sorts of things that you have to now do in the next 6 weeks?
So very quickly, it's getting to know who the key people around your campaign coordinator, the CLP chair, working with the other councillors in the different wards. You know, getting to know, bringing together a campaign team, mapping out the next 6 weeks, having a real clear grid of what your activities are going to be, getting your leaflets out. You know, so really, I mean, the hard work started today. Is about absolutely making sure we get voter turnout. Making sure that there's there's university and the Newman College in the constituency, making sure students are registered to vote, because actually registration of voters, especially when you've got a hospital and you've got medics coming into the region, there is a timescale for people to make sure that they're registered. So
22nd of May.
22nd of May, So there's a range of things that we'll be doing to A, get the voter turnout out, B, knocking doors, and then also giving a very clear message about what the issues are in the constituency that we want to get across to voters.
I think you mentioned that the hard work starts now, and it certainly does for Preet. And I think what you quickly have to get used to is actually the interest from not only the media. I mean, you've seen that since the announcement to press. I mean, all of the UK press have covered it, all the broadsheets, and also the Indian press. And this will be a big opportunity, because obviously Preet is potentially the first Sikh woman MP. But actually, it's about more than that. So certainly for local constituents, it's about bringing all of that, yes, your historical background and connection to the area, but also the policies, and bringing the Labour Party, those policies out to voters, and also connecting with the Conservative voters, because for us, the most important thing is issues. And as a network, one thing we've always said is we are issues focused. We have people from the Labour Party who we will support. We have people from the Conservative parties who we will openly support. And I think from our perspective, and the manifestos out there, is around the priorities in that. So it's working with the candidates that we have relationships and working background with, but also the rest of those that get appointed. And I'm sure the Conservatives will be announcing Sikh candidates. I think we've already heard that Paul Lippel will be standing, and also Samir Jussel in Feltham and Heston. So we hope there'll be more. We had 12 or 13 candidates last year in the last election. We're hoping there'll be more. But the focus is certainly on getting these issues back on the table.
And I think let me just try and sum up on, the whole point about this was, I think last time actually there were 28 candidates. There were quite a few UKIP candidates, strange enough, from the Sikh community. But this was all about winnable seats, whether it be for the Labour Party, whether it be for the Conservatives. And I think it's only fair to say that the Labour Party has delivered, because these are seats with a Labour majority as we stand today. So Birmingham, Edgbaston, Slough, they are both winnable seats. And I think that is the crucial thing, because you can have as many candidates as you want. But if you are not in a winnable seat, and I think this is now a challenge to the Conservative Party in the sense of Paul is clearly in a winnable seat. Samir Jussel's actually got a really tough fight on his hand against Seema Malhotra. But actually, going back to why we were saying Preet's going to be potentially the first Sikh woman, the first turban-wearing Sikh, actually Labour can already turn around, if Preet and Dhananjay get elected, to say to the Conservatives, where are your turban-wearing Sikhs? Where are your Sikh women? And the Conservative Party, I think that message needs to go out today to say you've still got an opportunity. There are going to be very safe Conservative seats that people are going to give up. They're literally giving them up every single day. And actually, David Cameron did go out of his way to put ethnic minorities in those safe seats where actually there might not be that many ethnic minorities. So I think there is, even today, a challenge for the Conservative Party.
Yeah, no, there is. And I think the challenge, certainly, as you mentioned, is out there now. And I think for us, it's a case of supporting Sikh candidates. We've publicly put a pledge out there that any Sikh candidate we would support as a network. It's our duty. And as much support we do will be based on the issues and the commitment they give to the Sikh Manifesto issues and the priorities. So I think the challenge is for all parties, and certainly the Liberal Democrats as well, and even the SNP. So Chanjit Singh was a candidate there. I don't know if he's been selected yet, but the point is the focus, and Labour have taken that first step. They were caught on the heels of the last election. They've certainly addressed it this year, and we certainly commend them on that. But I think, like you said, it's now set for all. And it should be on the talent as well. Yeah. We're a community that give charity. We don't really need it, and we don't ask for it. But on its own merits and the talent that we have in the Sikh community is more than credible to stand on its own.
Preet, we've got about another 5 minutes before we take a break, and I think you're not going to be with us. And I think that's the sad note of this. That for the next 6 weeks you are going to be extremely busy, knocking doors. Clearly, viewers of KTV watching this program, if any of them want to help, there's always room to actually get involved in politics, because that's what we were talking about. And here is a general election happening in 6 weeks' time. So if there are viewers out there, find out in your local area, and I'm sure in the West Midlands there are so many Sikhs that are excited about Breed Standing that you're going to be inundated with volunteers. But you're sort of sitting there, and we can talk forever. I want to give you a few minutes to talk about how it feels, because you've got a lot on your shoulders as potentially the first Sikh woman. You've got a majority, and it's going to be a tough. It's a very middle class seat, a very mixed seat. You talk about students. How's it feeling?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite overwhelming. It's a huge responsibility to have on your head to be the first Sikh female MP, but it's also it's absolutely needed, though. It's a real must. I mean, we need to engage more women, not just from Sikh backgrounds, but BAME backgrounds, to get involved in politics. It doesn't have to be about standing for councillors or MPs, but it has to be around activism, campaigning, and supporting in different ways. So in that sense, yes, I mean, it's a big thing, but you're right. The most important thing for me is understanding who are the electorate in the constituency, and being able to connect, listen, and represent them, and be that voice in Westminster on the issues that really matter to them. So I haven't gone in with, some of the key national policy issues around health and schools and the funding cuts and how that impacts locally are massive. But actually, I really want to listen to people on the doorstep. I think it's really important you absolutely hear the diverse views, because there will be very diverse views. So I think it's really exciting. I'm really excited. I'm going to enjoy every bit of this campaign. There's a fantastic team I have already in the constituency. They're very active. They've won elections. They've got a history of making elections. I'd like this to be the anniversary of the 20th year celebration, because actually Gisela has been there for 19 years. So this will be the 20th year of Labour victory in the constituency. So there's a lot of hard work to be done. That's fine. I'm committed. I think it's already an ethos I have. I'm committed to that. So yeah, absolutely got to win this seat, and I'm absolutely determined we will.
I think I'll just probably add it a bit more directly, actually, in terms of what we do need is that now we have for the last 2 years, certainly, all the Sikh community have been calling for, we don't have a Sikh MP, felt that we were going backwards. Well, actually, no, it was a process, and those that have been involved know what's gone on. Now we have them. We have 2 from Labour, and we'll see what the Conservatives do.
We've got Paul.
Everyone needs to back them. So that is individuals, that is students come out and do the leaflet flying, because that's something that we're not really that strong at. All of the Sangat, and Preet has a long family history in politics, and her dad did an immense amount for the local community, and the Jason Sugar is very well known in Birmingham, probably up and down the country. So I think having that background, family support, everybody, all the Sikh community need to come out, help the campaign, fund the campaign, because none of this happens automatically. That for all the business people in Edgbaston, it's an affluent area, we've got a lot of successful Sikhs who've been prominent in business and property. And again, it's for those guys an opportunity to step out and support the campaign, support Breathe on social media, on the doorstep, and financially, because ultimately then our Gurdwara, because they're all our backbone and our institutes. And again, here's an opportunity to really show unity as a community, that actually we can really accelerate a candidate and really put them where we need them to be.
Just to give an example, Breathe, this morning I had a Conservative contact me about yourself and say, look, you've created such a profile for Breathe with all this publicity. I hope she wins. And I said to this Conservative who is from our community, well, actually, I'm hoping Conservatives can actually see beyond party politics here as well, because this is actually really important to women. It's important to our community. And I think, that is probably one of those things about breaking down some of these barriers, because this is very much issues based, and selecting who you believe is the best candidate for Edgbaston.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think you can just, you're right, because I've got a wealth of experience in terms of my role as a councillor, as a cabinet member for public health and protection. And actually, I've always been in public service. Being part of the Sikh Network has given me a platform and a profile that I've been able to work on. Being part of the Joe Cox leadership program of thousands of women that applied, one of 57, having done Next Generation Leaders, being a grassroots campaign and really understanding. So you're right, you've got to absolutely be credible, because you will be invited to hustings. People will ask you very challenging questions. You've got to be able to respond. You've got to know what the position is nationally around policy issues, and keep a breath. And actually in politics, one thing I've learned very quickly is you absolutely got to be up to date on current issues, what is happening around you every single moment. And if you're not, and then you will struggle. Yeah.
Just one final thing, because I know I talked about a Conservative contact. I know lots of people have been in touch with you, perhaps that never knew you until now. How's that felt?
Yeah, what I'm trying not to do is allow any of that to sort of distract from what needs to be done on the ground. I'm really clear about that. It's great that I'm getting lots of more likes on Twitter, and there's a great social media presence and a lot of support. And actually, I really feel humbled and honoured about the level of support I've had across the board from lots of different places. But actually, I'm also clear that there is a lot of work to be done on the ground, and actually I can't let that distract me, regardless of. It's brilliant to see that we'll get some great high-profile MPs come to join the campaign. But actually, it is us and the team on the ground that's got to deal with this every day and represent the people of that constituency. And so I whilst it's really great, it's also something that I'm just thinking about the focus of what is really important at this time. I've taken unpaid leave from work until the 8th of June, so I will be working on this really day and night.
Yeah, and I think this was the thing. You've just moved house, turning around to your husband and saying, I'm not going to be bringing any money in for the next at least 6 weeks. It's a huge commitment that most people would, when they hear about it, think, oh, I don't want to do that. Literally in the last minute, I think I wanted to make a plug really for the manifesto, because in a way, when this was launched, some people shied away from it, but you didn't, Dhanmanjeet didn't, and I think it just demonstrates actually being involved with the Sikh Network, being involved with the manifesto. I think most politicians saw this as a huge development for the community, and actually we're bearing fruit now in a very short period of time. So Preet, we're going to take a break here. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to make a plug for another program, Politics Matters, because we did say last week we're going to go out with the leading Sikh candidates to see what happens, not in the studio, because you're going to be out there, and actually KTV should be following you, Dhanmanjeet, Borlop, whoever it is that have got a chance to win, because actually we want to encourage people to understand what's involved. So let's take a break now. I'm going to say Fateh, and then me and Jazz will be back to for the second part of the Sikh Network show. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome back to the Sikh Network show. We were talking earlier about better representation of Sikhs in Parliament, and Preet Kaur was with us. We're going to talk about other issues linked to the Sikh Manifesto, given there's a general election on the 8th of June. There are issues in there, Jazz, about separate monitoring of Sikhs, the code of practice for the 5Ks and the Dastard, more Sikh ethos schools, a monument for the World War I. These are issues where actually the Sikh Network's been making progress in the last 2 years. So what would be your message to viewers out there when someone knocks on their doors and says, what sort of issues should they raise?
Yeah, and I think first and foremost, the manifesto wasn't just for 2015.
Yeah.
Actually, the date on it is to 2020.
At least.
So, as a minimum. And I think the first important is for all of the viewers at home is download the Sikh Manifesto. You can get it from our website, thesicknetwork.com. Download the manifesto because the issues in there are still relevant, and they are the issues of the Sikhs because of the process that we did to collate those. It was widespread across the UK and consultation process. So those issues are absolutely valid. And I think the good thing is when we wrote it in 2015, those issues hadn't been progressed. Some of them were long-standing issues like the census that you mentioned, but there was something that we wanted politicians to sign up to and make commitments to. And we got a lot of them to do that. I think the good thing is, and another achievement of the network has been that we've made progress on some of those, specifically the ones you mentioned around the code of practice. That is now being drafted. We will still need government to push it out and endorse it, and that's something that can be mentioned, and we'll do a further show on that as the campaign goes on. Census is another big one in that we have now engaged with the ONS, so there are testing has been happening over the last month or so. So it is well there, it's on the agenda in terms of separate Sikh monitoring. So again, progress is being made. It's not a fresh demand from politicians at this stage. We may need that pressure. Again, the World War Monument, that's something, again, it was unpolitically in terms of all the parties agreed to it. But that's something, again, it's well established, well recognised. The mayor's made a commitment to it. So those things will happen as due process. So we're quite confident in some of those, the priorities that the network had set, that though there is making progress on. And better representation, I think, is all the time. We've made a huge stride on that in terms of the first step of nominations. And we talked about Preet and we talked about Dan Manjeet. And we'll continue to push that. And that's something, again, that we want everybody to get engaged. Use Dan Manjeet, use Preet as their role models, and that they can get involved at a local level and national level. I think when politicians knock on the door this time around and they come to Gurdwara, and certainly we'll be approaching them, is manifesto related. The document is absolutely valid and fresh. So again, coming back to use the document, we'll try and get more out there in terms of physical copies, but it's all downloadable. Read the issues and raise the issues that are relevant to you. But from our perspective, I think issues like genocide of 1984 is going to be a big issue.
Well, can I touch upon, if you pick up issues like Sikh genocide, Section 9 of the Sikh Manifesto talks about Sikh genocide getting a UN-led inquiry. But obviously, given the Canadian experience, given the publicity around this with Ajit and Sajjan's visit to India, this must be an easy topic for people on their doorsteps to ask every politician, well, it was a genocide, what was it?
And this is something that we've seen that politicians skipped around the definitions. And some people say, well, it's just semantics. Was it a genocide? Was it a massacre? Well, actually, no, these things are important because having the right descriptor and the right definition for what it was, which is a genocide, because why then have them? You have a definition and then a criteria what meets that, and if something meets that, then why are you shy of calling it? The other aspect of what it says in the manifesto is that it then triggers a number of processes, protocols in terms of international recognition and an international pressure, whether through the UN or through other means, that governments need to do. So this is something that becomes formalized in that aspect, and it can be remembered not only for Sikhs but on other genocide events from the UN. But also, I think we have seen the Provincial Parliament of Ontario make that announcement, which Jagmeet Singh led, and that got a lot.
It was Harinder that led it. Just to correct you,
sorry, yeah,
and Liberals, and Jagmeet's fully behind it.
Fully behind it, and I think that sets the standard, if you like, for Sikhs and non-Sikhs who are campaigning for human rights, because ultimately this is a human rights issue. It's not a Sikh-only issue. Anyone who stands for human rights cannot ignore the genocide for Sikhs in 1984, and has an obligation to actually raise it and put it on the table. So this gives the precedent and the opportunity that actually here is a Western government that have had these conversations, or Western political system in Ontario that have had these conversations and are brave enough and are mature enough to have them. And I think UK is no different. In fact, we should be looking to do more than that. And not only in councils up and down the country, where we can have these motions passed, but actually in Parliament itself. And I think that's something that when candidates come to the doorstep, to ask them, what is their position on the Sikh Genocide 1994? Are they aware of it? Do they understand the human rights aspect? And are they willing to back and have that debate and conversations in Parliament and get it recognised as a genocide as it should be?
One of the things, just an extension really of the Sikh Manifesto, that the Sikh Manifesto is obviously for all politicians that come to Westminster. But I remember last week someone asked me, well, actually, couldn't the Scottish Parliament do a resolution on the Sikh genocide? And maybe that's something for KTV viewers in Scotland. We've got a very proactive Sikh community, particularly in Glasgow. Well known to Nicola Sturgeon. She comes to the Gurdwara. So here is a challenge to Scottish Sikhs. How about, getting one over the Canadians and getting something done in the Scottish Parliament, because I think the door's open there.
And I think that's what I think, having the media and KTV and having these issues and having the courage to actually talk about these issues, because that's ultimately what in terms of our faith and our dharma is about, is having that courage to talk about these things when others potentially will shy away from them. This should be a race. Who is going to get this out on the top, and who's going to then beat that standard and go further beyond, because actually that is progress. And that shows that actually we can have an intellectual conversation and dialogue about this, and we can actually move these issues forward and get the relevant restitution that is necessary with them.
It's funny, we were talking to Preet last week on the network show and saying, she goes, I've been approached by my constituents in Sandwell to raise this. Well, obviously she's moved on to bigger and better things now, but wherever people are, and it doesn't have to be done through Sikh politicians. It can be done through non-Sikh politicians.
And we've seen that even in Wolverhampton Southwest, where it was a non-Sikh, Rob Maris, held that seat, and who campaigned probably harder than any previous of the Sikh MPs that were there on these issues. So this is, and as I come back to, it is a human rights issue, and I think it's an obligation for every Sikh as a voter who considers 1984 important to them to ask their MP whether he is Sikh, non-Sikh, male, female, no matter what. The issue is about what does it matter to the constituent, not what does it matter to the politician.
A couple of other issues in the Sikh Manifesto. One is Section 8 is about the call for an independent public inquiry into the British role in 1984. And actually that's evolved. As we've seen since 2014, there were further revelations last year that actually maybe Britain did provide further support to the Indian authorities, SAS support. Now that's been a huge issue. I know the Sikh Federation have led on the legal side, but actually every Sikh sitting at home can play a part in this, can't they?
No, and this is something that's very important, and we're approaching that 33rd anniversary of June 1984, which will be marked in London on the 4th Sunday, the 4th of June. And I think it's important for people to understand actually what the request in the manifesto is, because 1984 it can get quite emotional for many people who are involved in it and were active in that way. Well, actually, the focus is not on India. The focus isn't on what the Indian Army did and the massacre and wow. It's actually on what the role our government did. Because we live in this country, we engage in the political system here. We are asking questions of our government, and they've already admitted complicity. So it's not even trying to prove something that they're disputing. They've actually admitted complicity. They sent an SAS officer. Now it's about the extent of the support and the period in which it carried off. What we got into February 2014 was a very short response from saying it was very limited. It's only for a period of time. And actually, what we've later discovered is actually there was support and dialogue and discussions going on for a lot longer into matters that were even more concerning, with other operations that happened in Punjab. So I think, again, coming back to the individual voter and the constituencies, no matter up and down the UK, is that this is a very, very important episode in our recent history, and something that is never going to go away until actually truth and justice is out there. So what we're asking people, again, is understand the requests, ask the politicians when they're there around the community are asking for fresh investigation into what happened in 1984. Yes, we are very much aware that the Cabinet Secretary did a review. That review was published, and the Foreign Secretary at the time, William Hague, made the statement in the Commons. But actually, there are much more open questions, and Labour have come out very strongly and actually said that they should absolutely be, and there's significant information there, untold files there that warrant a fresh investigation. And I know Sikh organisations like the Federation have made representations to that effect to the Foreign Secretary and the Home Secretary and to the Prime Minister. And I think the more we all ask for, all we're asking for is the truth. We're not asking for them to go and change their trade relationships with India. We're not asking for them to question the files of the military aspect of India. Actually, all we're saying is look at the information that's out there and give a much more reasonable and empathetic response to the Sikhs living in this country. And I think that's due.
Jazz, isn't it just the simple case that actually if a politician comes to a Gurdwara, comes knocking on your door, basically all people are saying, we want the truth. That's all it is. We want the truth about what our government did. Not just in 1984, but what followed. And in terms of the Sikh community here as well, because those are the sorts of things that started coming out about what we've termed anti-Sikh measures at the behest of the Indian authorities. But it's about this government. Whereas what we talked about earlier, the genocide, the UN-led inquiry, Section 9, that's about then potentially using that as a platform to actually say the only way we'll get to the real truth about what happened in 1984 in terms of India's role will actually have to be an international thing, which can only come through genocide. Still got a bit of time left over. I want to talk about one other issue in the manifesto, which is probably the toughest issue, which is Section 10, which is around self-determination. But also talk about, this is the 70th anniversary of when India and Pakistan were created. Punjab was divided. Often people refer to the land of the five rivers, the land of our gurus, that was the Sikh homeland. Is this an opportunity to talk about what happened 70 years ago?
I think elections are an opportunity to talk about a lot of issues, because you have the ear of the politicians and you have the ear of the parties, and we've had it. Both parties have reached out to the Sikh Network, Conservatives and Labour, to request what are the key issues. And we're hopeful that some of the issues that we touched on that will make the manifesto of each of their parties. So they're in the Sikh manifesto, but we're also looking to see how serious the parties are, because they also know that lip service no longer is enough. Actual positive action is enough, and we've seen that demonstrated with the nomination. Absolutely. So we're also now looking for actually further documented commitments in their manifestos around some of these Sikh issues. Either the three that we touched on that we're currently progressing, the census, the code of practice, or the World War Monument, or even serious ongoing issues like the 1984 inquiry. And as we touched on, as you mentioned, the Scottish National Party, they passed a resolution in the Scottish Assembly about calling for an independent public inquiry. So there is wider public support for this. So I think this gives an opportunity for them to recognise the seriousness of these issues, understand where the Sikh community are coming from and our demand, and it is about truth fundamentally, that this is what we're seeking, and then international restitution, because we've felt the brunt and we've been the only campaigners of this for 33 years. Now it's about time that actually, being the custodians of truth and justice and freedom, as Sikhs always have been, that actually those values are reflected by others. I guess also an aspect of this opportunity to have wider conversations. You talked about the 70th anniversary of 1947 and partition. And again, this is something that the British have a role in, because pre-annexation in 1849, it was the wider Sikh kingdom. Britain were involved in all of that, the Anglo-Sikh wars, and then the treaties that followed. but also then in the rushed partition, the exit from India, a year earlier than planned in 1947 as opposed to 1948. And with all things, when plans are rushed, what that causes is either an unintended or an ill-thought strategy, which caused displacement and deaths of nearly 1 million people. So this is a massive issue for Sikhs, and it's not even that long ago. We're talking 70 years, and that's very recent history if you talk about history in the wider context. So to think about that, and I know many people in this country will celebrate being independent of the British, but actually there is a darker side to that. And I think it's about having that openness to talk about it. And some of the things that went on in that period, in that colonial period, and also into that very bloody partition aspect around what promises were made to the Sikhs. And this is something that we investigated and have looked into. But again, encourage many young students and historians out there to look further into this, into the history archives around what promises were made to Sikhs around their homeland during partition, and having it split into 3 potentially. So these are conversations that are happening back then. And I think it's important that these things are also uncovered and brought into the mainstream when we talk about the 70 years of Indian independence.
And finally, we can talk about history, and we talk about 1947, an issue that really came after the manifesto was produced was when Justin Trudeau apologised for what happened in 1914, 102 years later last year. It clearly raised the issue of Jallianwala Bagh, 1919. Actually, if we think about it, we don't know when the next general election will come, but if it came 5 years from now, there'll be the 100th anniversary of Sikh and Genocide and things like that as well. So is there another opportunity to, rather than just talk about the Sikh sacrifices in the World War, which is a massive thing and having a monument, but we also bring in, you mentioned the darker side of killing people in Amritsar on the 13th of April 1919, or what happened in in Sikh and Genocide. Are these sorts of issues good to talk about? Absolutely, because one thing, first and foremost, we should never forget our history. Because ultimately, those martyrs before us have paved the way for Sikhs, and actually their martyrdom has been for the benefit of us living today. And whether that's from the Gurus, whether that was through Banda Singh Bahadur's Raj, or through then Maharaj Ranjit Singh's Raj, or even through the 80s, and through the Sikh movement. That bloodshed and that martyrdom has actually been for us to live as free Sikhs today. So we should never forget that. And I think given that we're still celebrating Vaisakhi this month, that it's actually very relevant that in Vaisakhi in 1919, there was an open call to gunfire to kill innocent Sikhs that men,
were
women,
there
and children.
celebrating.
And non-Sikhs were there as well.
Non-Sikhs were there. So that's just, and again, if you put that into context, can you just imagine a Vaisakhi celebration in today's context? Women, children, Mila environment, fun, remembering the birth of the Khalsa, and an army has come into that park, set their aim, and they're told to fire an open fire, and people are diving into wells to save themselves. And I mean, that's death or death. That's the alternative. And I think the way that happened under the British rule and under the British command, I think as we approach the centenary and the 100 years of that, I think it's absolutely right to have a conversation, and actually for the Prime Minister of this country to acknowledge it and apologise. I think David Cameron visited Jallianwala Bagh and laid a wreath and regretted it, but actually didn't go as far as actually a formal apology. And I think, again, disappointingly, we're following the Canadians in this instance. But I think, again, it shows a maturity that actually, again, some of the positives, actually, if the Conservative and the government and other politicians really do value the contribution of Sikhs in this country, where they repeatedly do say, and we have that mature relationship now, then surely a way of respecting that is to actually be brave enough and have that courage to say, these things did happen. They happened in the past. They were wrong. And we can admit them. We can apologise for them. I think that will actually go down very well with the Sikh community. We're a very forgiving community. We contribute immensely to British society, and the UK Sikh survey demonstrated some of those statistics and facts. But I think it's hard when you have these issues that continually get overlooked, because all we want to do is for them to be acknowledged, addressed, and then we work forward with a new relationship.
We've got about 5 minutes left, Jazz, but I want to really bring it back to the manifesto in its entirety. When the manifesto was produced something like 2 and a bit years ago, the big thing in there was about we've done so much for this country. Huge contribution. Like you said, it came through in the survey as well in different ways. But actually, I remember the very first meeting we had in Derby. We don't have that many meetings of the Sikh Network, but I remember Sukhrat Singh saying, you know, Sukhrat Singh leads of those that don't know him, but now will know him. He said the real test for the Sikh Manifesto is when you start to deliver. And actually, you know, just less than 2 years it's been since the last general election. You know, I think the strides we made in the last 2 weeks with Breed, with Dhanmanjit, you know, we're well on the way to starting to deliver better representation of Sikhs and having Sikhs in Parliament. But some of these other issues you mentioned, actually, you know, you don't achieve things overnight. But with very little resource, I would say no resource, we've managed to get the manifesto into the minds of politicians. And actually, there's a big role for the network in the next 6 weeks to get this in the mind of every new politician, the candidates, because a lot of them won't necessarily know about this. So that's another big role for the network, isn't it?
No, and I think that surprises us. Sometimes we look often back at it and say, are we achieving enough? And we can be quite critical, especially when we look at our resources, as you mentioned, the limited resources we have. But I think it is immensely satisfying because us, all the team are volunteers. We do this voluntarily. We all have day jobs. We all have family lives. We all have other commitments. So for us to dedicate around this and put ourselves out there that here's what we're measuring ourselves against. And to now look at it 2 years later to see that we have real talented Sikhs standing in winnable seats. I'm sure there'll be more from other parties, and I'm sure we'll push as many as we can and support them, and they have our commitment. And what we'll say is there's a call for them to get involved further, because it's demonstrated that the network has got a reach with the leadership, and we can progress and support candidates and sort of support their progression. And I think when we look back some of the achievements, so that is one that we certainly not only have achieved and progressed, but actually we got it on the agenda at a national level. That's affecting national policy. And that's huge. And sometimes that gets underestimated. But then moving it down to some tangible achievements. And again, where we've got to is really sort of satisfying that actually the effort that everybody does in the team and all the supporters that support us behind the scenes is actually providing success and tangible results, which we'll continue to pursue and push. But I think that's a measure that we should have on all Sikh organisations. Every time we put on, and recognise that these are volunteers, and let's not be overcritical, but actually let's support some of these now. Let's get behind them with resource. Let's get behind them with our support, and actually see what we can achieve. Because I've always believed that there's nothing we can't, as a community, there's nothing we can't achieve. If actually we present it in a professional manner, we articulate our position, and we utilise our skills and strengths and talent we have in the right sector, and put our best people forward on those issues, then I strongly believe that we're ahead of the rest. It's just having that confidence to put those right people forward and then back them.
Jazz, in the last couple of minutes, I'm just doing a quick summary. So I think the Sikh Manifesto, I remember doing the very first show, Sikh Network show on KTV, and saying it was a game changer. And actually, I'm going to come up with another phrase now. I think what the network's shown is we're a force to be reckoned with. A force to be reckoned with in the sense of everyone's part of the network. Your own words. Every organisation is part of the network in the sense of, you know, the Federation do certain things. You know, we focus on the 84 inquiry, we dabble in the census, and there's others from other organisations that work with us. The network tends to operate in the background, but a lot of these decisions happen because people do things in the background, not necessarily looking for the headlines. And I think politicians know this, and our community know this, that actually the manifesto was a brilliant idea. But actually, the force to be reckoned with is the network. And it makes a difference to the people that work in the network. We've seen it with Breathe. We've seen it with people like Dhanmanjit that openly will align with the manifesto.
Yeah. And that's the call to everybody, is that actually we've always said the network is the Sikh community, organisations and individuals, and that's always what we've always tried to do. Our objective has always been about reaching out, using the talent we've got, progressing them and giving them the support, to them the opportunity to shine, because that then takes the Panth forward. And that's what we wanted, was that collective movement to really move the Panthak agenda and Panthak issues forward. And I think, again, doing it in the right manner and learning from the new skills we develop through generations. I think that's that transition that we've certainly worked through. And I think, again, commitment is that we'll continue to do that and continue to be the voice for Sikhs, certainly in the political environment, but also in other areas as well. And to make sure that everything we do collectively as a Sikh, British Sikhs, actually gets onto that radar.
So could I thank the viewers of KTV for watching the Sikh Network show. The Sikh Network show is brought to you via KTV. Keep supporting the network, but also support KTV. KTV are providing a service for you at home, bringing these messages, bringing these achievements into your homes, but a channel has to be supported financially. So if you're sitting at home and thinking, KTV are doing a good job, they're bringing programs like the Sikh Network show to you, then reach into your pockets. Because the one thing we learned from the UK Sikh survey is your pockets are deep. And at the end of the day, our Daswand should go to those places where you can actually see some real positive developments, and they're allowing organisations such as the Sikh Network to bring these messages to your homes. So if we say Fateh here, and join us again next week. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.